Welcome to the latest episode of Pinnacle's NFL Insight. I'm your host, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. I'm joined by PFF data scientist Ben Brown and also legend NBC, Drew Wary Bet Spurts, Whale Capper, one of the best, the Deep Dive, one of the best gambling podcasts out there, especially now I guess Ben, you do the PFF forecast now still, but I'll say I think the Deep Dive is my favorite betting podcast, and it has been for a while. Drew Dinsick, Drew, how are you doing? You're from which hole at the Waste Management Open?
We're looking up the fairway of the 18th hole. I did a show earlier where Jordan Spieth was in the bunker chipping out in the background. It was pretty fun. It has been a ridiculously good tournament. This is like once in a lifetime. You get 23 of the 24 best golfers in the world in the same city as the two best teams in football. And all of this coalescing in one place, one time. So happy to be here and getting to experience it. And honestly, I had high expectations for the Waste Management Open. They have been exceeded, and it's only Thursday. Like, this is going to get cooler as it goes through the week. They're expecting something like 600,000 people out here. And golf puts on a pretty solid product. So I'm having a great time, but mostly at this point, I'm excited for the Super Bowl, man. It's been a lot of talking. It's been a lot of talking about it. I think a lot of people are expecting a great game. I've taken a pretty strong stance, which is unusual. Usually I'm the one preaching like, these markets are sharp. Don't be an idiot. Don't donk your bankroll on a Super Bowl bet, which is the most liquid market we have all year in this sport. But it doesn't feel well priced to me, this game. I don't think that there's some key stuff I feel like hasn't been factored in.
Yeah, I think that's that was the impression I got. And I'm similar to you, Drew, where this week I've had a pretty strong stance to under in this game. And yes. I just think the total is too high. I think both teams, when they get in their groove in this one, the games go under. And I don't see a slugfest. It's weird, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. Obviously, we do want to preview the Super Bowl, and that's going to be the majority of what we spend here. I do have to read this though, because Pinnacle is putting on continues to put on a pretty cool playoff competition here. And so here we go with the tension building here in Arizona as we get ready for Chiefs versus Eagles. But before it begins, we would like to send a good luck message to the winner of the Pinnacle Big Bet competition, who topped the latest leaderboard with the selections help through listening to the NFL Insights on Pinnacle.com. The world's sharpest bookmaker gave you the chance to win a $10,000 bet on football's biggest game with Pinnacle's Big Bet, and that bet has now been placed. The winner has decided to place the bet on the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh,
which is
disappointing.
Not necessarily what I'm guessing
Yikes.
Drew will bet. And it's so funny. It's so funny because it's cool. Obviously I listen to you guys' show, and you guys are very, very, and you too, Ben, you guys are very, very responsible semantically about where you stand on games, because you don't want to lead the listener astray.
Sure.
But there were a couple tweets that I tweeted at that Drew liked that made me realize that he wants my Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl here. And so I feel like my fandom is on the right side here. But yes, the winner of this competition has placed a bet on the Philadelphia Eagles for $10,000. If it wins, he or she will win $8,400. So good luck with the big bet. There will be more prizes to be won in 2023 with Pinnacle's big bet competition as well. So just click the link in the description to learn more. Ben, we've been doing this podcast all year, and I think that we've had some major hits, right? We had the Jaguars, mid-season to win the AFC South. We had,
yes.
Patrick Mahomes, back when Jalen Hurts was like minus 150 to win MVP. We're like, okay, this is ridiculous. Play, take the field there. Obviously, Detroit going over their win total. That was really fun. This is one though, Chiefs, Eagles, whereas Drew said there's not, in this game, it's very liquid, but because this number is so close to zero, right? And I think most people will say, hey, between -2.5 and +2.5, there's not that much in the way of value to be gained swinging from one to the other. Ben, do you think that there is? Do you think that this is mispriced, and you think Kansas City should be favored in this game?
Yeah, so I don't want to steal either of you guys' thunder, and I think just reading the tea leaves a little bit, I'm maybe the least bullish on the Kansas City Chiefs. I know for a fact I probably would be more so than Eric, but if Drew is leading in the Chiefs' direction as well, I'll at least like start it off by maybe trying to promote a little bit of the big bet and the reason why he probably went in the Eagles' direction on that one. But I do think, like, for me personally, going into this game, I do have mainly futures, I would say, on the Philadelphia Eagles. And the question for me has always been not necessarily like what side do I like, but if I really did want to hedge, I would say some Eagles future exposure on the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think at the opening number at -2.5, -2 basically, I think Circa was kind of like the leader of being pro Chiefs, kind of the opener, whatever. Like the market very much, I would say, probably seemed the most correct from what I was seeing from a modeling perspective at that point at -2.5. I do think with a fully healthy Patrick Mahomes and a fully healthy receiving unit, which is very much probably the expectation now heading into the Super Bowl. Like, I do think the Chiefs are probably the correct side. To me, like the handicap and everything else, it seems maybe oversimplistic, but it does very much seem like if the Philadelphia Eagles can't really jump out to an early lead and can't really play from ahead, like, this is a matchup that could very well get out of hand relatively quickly. And if the Eagles are in that sort of scenario, like, there's still a number of viable paths to the Chiefs actually winning. So Mahomes is very much the trump card. Obviously, I do think, Philadelphia specifically has probably the matchup advantage at every other position outside of quarterback and tight end. But at the separation between, where Patrick Mahomes and what Jalen Hurts can provide, I think is too great to have the Chiefs, I would say, be a slight dog right now.
Yeah, I think though, and Drew, you not only were a fan of this, but also Jeffrey Benson, one of the odds makers at Circa Las Vegas, which is always makes me know that I tweeted something good. I don't think the matchup advantage everywhere else with Kansas City. Like, look, offensive line, like Tooney and Humphrey, that's as good of left guard center as you're going to get in the NFL. Right guard Trey Smith's pretty good. Tackles aren't great, but we saw against San Francisco that they can assuage that. Tight end, of course, is great. I think their depth at wide receiver is pretty good. I know top end, they have they have problems there, and I think their defense, look, they're seventh in yards per play allowed. Their defense, frankly, won them the last two playoff games. I think we're all sleeping on the Chiefs from player 2 to 53, Drew.
We agree 100% on that. I would even say that the way that the Chiefs defense is playing over the final stretch of the season is better than what you've seen from the Eagles. The Eagles had an absolute laugher of a performance against the Cowboys, to come down the stretch. And that wasn't, you can point to, well, yeah, they didn't have Hurts, it was Gardner Minshew. That Eagles defense got absolutely pushed around. And I don't see why the Chiefs wouldn't be able to have similar success. It's I have never really loved the Jonathan Gannon concept of what he wants his defense to be from a basic standpoint. We saw Mahomes go up against this unit last year, and granted, it wasn't the same personnel in terms of strength, but they got whatever they wanted in that game. What do you have? 500 yards passing? And honestly, they scored 44 points. It felt like it could have been 84. They literally had no resistance, no answers. He shreds his soft zone, and I think in general, if you're like, hey man, the iterations Mahomes has had to go through here now, particularly this year with this cast of characters, no longer has Tyreek Hill to throw to. It has only made him more dangerous. It has forced him to learn other ways to be the best quarterback in football. And now he comes into a game where he's got 2 weeks to get right. So the scrambling and the pocket elusiveness should be back. And I just don't see how, even if you are sure that the Eagles are better at 2 through 53. The one is the most important player on the field by a lot. And the angle that I've been dying to talk to you about, because you have to take into a lot of intangibles to come up with a fair price for a matchup like this. These are both excellent teams. Everyone knows this, right? And if you were to tell me that neutral strength, middle of the season, this is a neutral field, just based on strength, middle of the season, this is a coin flip between these two teams, I'm not going to argue with that. But yeah, fine. It's shades of gray. Who's better in a neutral state? This is not a neutral state. This is Andy Reid's 4th Super Bowl. This is Mahomes' 3rd. I vividly remember what Jalen Hurts looked like in his first playoff game against the Buccaneers last year. And this is even more pressure. This is an even more significant position. And he is not out there talking like, yeah, shoulder feels great. Love the zip I'm getting off my ball. I watched him throw against San Francisco 49ers. It was not impressive at all. I came out of that Niners-Eagles game, and my major takeaway wasn't like, wow, look at that. Look at that scoreboard. What a margin. They just beat the best defense in the NFL. No, my takeaway was, dude, Hurts isn't making the throws that he was making over the first half of the season when this offense was its best. Completion percentage over expectation has been negative now, 4 games in a row for him? Right. His average depth of target is down, which tells me he's not even really trusting to go to the deep ball as much. Like, all of these are huge red flags that Hurts could give you the deer in the headlights look. And like, I'm not saying that is what will happen, but if there is a meaningful probability of outcomes where he is nervous, he makes mistakes early, he's down on himself, or just a little bit inaccurate and can't make the fizzle plays on a 3rd and long, then this game could get out of hand quickly, because the thing we've never seen all season is, what do the Eagles look like with a deficit? We have one example, and it was Commanders, and honestly, like, everything went wrong for them in that game, penalties and all kinds of other nonsense.
Well, then, Drew, even then, like, that was week 10 was the first game that the Eagles trailed in the second half, right? And they passed for 170 yards. The following week against the Colts, they won on a last second drive that didn't have a completion by Jalen Hurts against Jeff Saturday's Colts, and that was they won 17-16. That was 173 passing yards. Against the Packers, they threw for 137 against that defense. The only reason, and they gave up 33 in that game, despite rushing themselves for 363 yards. To your point, and then look at the passing yards. The last 3 games that Hurts has played when healthy: 207 against the Giants, 148 against the Giants off a bye, 121 last week. I agree with you, and I think it's interesting. Because we see the point spread being, really close to 0, at Pinnacle, and we got this far in the podcast without mentioning this, but Pinnacle has the Eagles at currently -121. This is the highest been for a while. Chiefs are at +110. +1's the handicap, with the Chiefs +102. To lay a point, you have to pay -112 on the Eagles. Total of the game, again, absurd. I think 50.5, over -109, under -103. I think that whoever you think is going to win this game, it's going to be a blowout. I think whichever advantage plays, -6.5 is probably the best bet. And so to me, that's how you play this game from a betting standpoint. I think that you sell points, Ben, and you get the payout.
Right. You want to know something funny, Eric? Real quick, just because you said -6.5. We're in Arizona. Betting is legal. I have been signing up for books and getting my my free bets everywhere I can. Every single free bet, and I don't understand that they let you do this. Every single free bet I've played, KC -6.5. I think the best price I got was like +240. I think that's absolutely insane. And I agree with your take overall. Then we forgot about the intangible. The big bet is on the Eagles. We're on the same side as the book. We're on the same side as the book. Thank you very much. We're on the same side as the book. Yeah.
And by the way, Drew brings up
the same needs as Pinnacle. Yeah. I like that.
And while this doesn't apply to Pinnacle, because Pinnacle is such a great book, they don't have to do these things. But for some of the Square books that offer you free bets and things like that, the free bets you should take are bets that are even money or better. Don't be laying juice on free bets. Take the bets that where you're getting a positive payout. That's always the way to play those. Ben, what do you think as far as what's the scenario, Ben, where this game is close?
Right, and that was kind of what I was going to touch on, because I do think Drew brought up a really interesting point, because I do think I would assign the probability of like a Patrick Mahomes like masterclass type game where like nothing else matters except for his performance, roughly probably around like 10 to 15% of outcomes or something like that. And then Drew brought up a point where there's very much a subset of scenarios where Jalen Hurts struggles and nothing else really matters. He turns the football over. The Eagles are kind of completely out of it or whatever. And I do think that's probably roughly in the same ballpark of probability, like 10 to 15% or something. And then there very much is, 70% middle ground where a lot of things can happen. But I still think that probably tilts in the Chiefs' direction, given how much Patrick Mahomes is going to matter in a close game. So the scenario for me to see the Eagles actually win, and probably win pretty convincingly, is completely controlling, the edge situation along the offensive line with their 2 superior tackles. If Frank Clark and George Kalafdis, I would say, have some issues establishing the edge, and Steve Spagnuolo, I would say, kind of sits in the, the too high cover shell situation and kind of dares Jalen Hurts to throw to him. I don't expect them to actually have that be the game plan, but that has very much been their path, I would say, throughout the AFC, playoff picture, and very much, has been their preferred approach from a defense perspective. But if they're kind of stuck in that way, I do think the Eagles could jump out to an early lead, mainly on the back of Jalen Hurts' rushing ability and some Kenneth Gainwell and everything else, and probably don't have to hit a ton of chunk plays through the passing game in order to arrive at that situation. And then if you do think that, the pass rush for the Eagles can be successful, it probably would take a little bit of a limited Patrick Mahomes and not being able to kind of navigate outside the pocket and buy time for a receiving unit that, I would say has kind of struggled outside of, Travis Kelce to actually gain separation quickly. Like, that's got to be the path to the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think that is like not only a finite, subset of games, but it is also asking a lot from a lot of different places in order for the Eagles to be successful.
Hot take, Drew, before we let you go and before we close a book on this season's worth of podcasts with myself and Ben Pinnacle here. Jalen Hurts is more injured than Mahomes. Let's get this out here. Yeah, my man was rinsing throwing the ball. Yeah. I've had high ankle sprains before. Like, look, the fact that Mahomes was out there and tested that ankle and did everything, had plays where he was hurt and he was dragging it around a little bit, and then you get 2 weeks off. It's in a warm temperature as opposed to in Arrowhead, where I was shivering in the stands for 3 freaking hours in a row. That is the underplayed part of this. Is Jalen Hurts is more injured than Mahomes, and if that's the case, this number's ridiculous.
Yep, we agree 100%. I've been looking at a couple fun ways to play that angle too. Like, you can get under longest completions, under obviously player props for Hurts. I like team total under 20.5 at 2-1 for the Eagles. Like, they don't get out of the teens. That happens in a huge percentage of my outcomes here. And then similarly, like the idea of the fact that he has been vocal and that you watch that San Francisco tape and he doesn't have touch on the deep ball. That he took a ton of shots as they were doing those design runs in the fourth quarter. All that is troubling. Based on everything you guys laid out, it sounds like, and I've been thinking about this, but I haven't fired yet. I was looking at just betting the second half under in the blind. Like, there's a realistic, like, the second half of this game might stink, right? Like, it might just be either whichever team is in control at halftime, 2 scores up, or gets up 2 scores early in the third quarter, like, just puts this game to sleep. And so I've been staring at some of those props because they're all priced like this is going to be a shootout to the end. And yeah, that's possible. Sure. Like that could happen. That's not an, it's not Drew, an outlier, but yeah.
That kind of reminds me of, and I don't mean to blaspheme Hurts, who's a legitimately good quarterback, I think, when healthy, maybe not a max contract guy, but remember when Tim Tebow played that playoff game against Tom Brady and they just got beat to sleep, and the fourth quarter of that game was just a bunch of handoffs. And they were just like, let's get out of this game without the guy being – and he had broken ribs, much like Hurts. And they were just like – and, of course, Tebow is nowhere close to as good as Hurts. But, like, they just were like, let's get out of this game, handing the ball off. Let's minimize embarrassment. I think that's one. And if Mahomes is legitimately hurt, let's say that's in the tail of probabilities, the Chiefs might do the same thing, right? And the game against Tampa Bay where that game went over in the first half, but comfortably under the rest of the game, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was like 21-6 or 21-9 in the first half, and then the game went comfortably under the second half. I think that's another outcome, Ben. Any closing remarks from you? We've gotten a really strong stance and very well supported stance from Drew. Ben, what's your final say on this final game of the 2022 NFL season?
I would say that I think you guys have convinced me now that I've got to talk live and in the flesh with you that I should very much be on the Chiefs side of things, even to hedge my futures bets on the Eagles. I know I was pretty pro Philadelphia to start.
Everybody.
I figured it might happen actually after talking to Eric, but there's obviously just there's a ton more paths to the Chiefs actually being successful, I would say, overall. And if they do end up being behind, there's still a ton of paths for them where I just don't see those sorts of outcomes favoring Philadelphia outside of getting to that early lead. So I do think the handicap is probably correct from that perspective.
Can I tee Eric up with a homer question?
Okay, for sure.
Can you give me a price on the likelihood that we ever again in our lives get to bet on Pat Mahomes as a dog in the Super Bowl?
That was going to be my thing. Week 3 of 2020, this is back, when I lived, when Ohio didn't have legal sports betting. And I called into my one of my best friends' radio station. I said, look, Mahomes is a field goal Mahomes is 3.5 against Baltimore. I'm driving to Indiana to put my mortgage on this. And, it's few and far between. I mean, we got them +4 at home to the Bills, or +3 to the Bills at home. I think they didn't cover that. But for the most part, Mahomes is an underdog. I mean, yeah, you actually absolutely have to do it. And, one last question for you, Drew. Mahomes is at roughly, let's look at what he is at Pinnacle if we have this this market here for MVP of the game. We do have Mahomes, possibly MVP. Like, what is there a path where you wouldn't bet Mahomes to be MVP and you're like, oh yeah, will Patrick Mahomes be MVP on Pinnacle? This is the best price I see, +130. Like, ooh, is that another way to bet the Chiefs? Because we saw in Super Bowl 54, Damien Williams had the game-winning touchdown, a game-clinching touchdown, 100 and some odd yards rushing, 125 or so total yards, if I remember correctly. And Mahomes threw 2 interceptions, and he still won MVP. I think +130 might be, if you have one bet to make this in this game, Mahomes to win MVP feels like, it sounds square, but it feels like the right one.
Yeah, my equity for Mahomes MVP if the Chiefs win is in the low 90s. So the math works out that I would take 130. And honestly, like, if you just do the thought exercise of, I'm going to make a case for some other Chief,
it doesn't work, right?
Kelsey, something so obscene has to happen that you're better off just going and putting together some ridiculous same game parlay for that, right? Like, you're going to get a better price.
If Valdez-Scantling goes for like 150 again and a touchdown, Mahomes is going to have a great game. If Kelsey catches 14 balls, it's because Mahomes does voodoo magic in the pocket. The running backs, I don't think Pacheco is good enough to like even have the Damien Williams performance, and the Damien Williams performance wasn't good enough to win MVP. And one angle that maybe we have not, is the fact that some Chiefs are sick, but like that, of course, decreases the chance that Chris Jones will get MVP, as he's been kind of sick this week. So yeah, I just think +130 is a really good price, for Mahomes MVP. So guys, this has been a lot of fun. We know Drew has to get back to all the festivities in Arizona, Glendale, Scottsdale, all around that place. Uber. I stayed in Scottsdale, went to Phoenix for the convention center. The whole place is amazing, and obviously Drew is basking in it right now. So really appreciate you hopping on with us, Drew. Ben, it's been a really fun season. So for Drew Dinsick, for Ben Brown, this has been Eric Eager. This has been the Pinnacle NFL Insights podcast. Thank you for joining us, and see you next year.